Welcome to this episode of Trauma Rock Stars. I want to introduce you to Jerry. He has got an incredible story. The word resilience, I don't even think describes you properly. There's got to be a bigger, better word than that to describe you. But welcome so much to the episode. I'm so excited to have you as a guest.
I appreciate you having me for sure. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jerry is you'll see when you talk to him, his story. He's just very raw and truth, and he doesn't sugarcoat anything, which is what I love about his story, and that's the way he is, because I think that sometimes we just need to hear it head on. And do you want to start with your upbringing? You pulled yourself out of so many different obstacles in your life. What area do you feel comfortable starting with?
Sure. I think that I'll probably start just kind of prefacing that throughout the story of my life, I kind of have this mantra that I adopted very early on, probably in my 20s, and that is that I am who I am because of where I come from and in spite of where I come from. And that really, for me, probably about 28 or 29, about the time my son was born, which gave me a whole brand new lease on life and a completely different way of looking at things. That kind of galvanized the way that I looked at the way that I was raised and kind of the things that I have been through since then. So with that being said, I'm child number 7. My mother had 6 kids when she was 23 years old. And if you can think about it, she had a 0-year-old infant that she brought home from the hospital and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old. 6 kids. A washer, no dryer for most of that time. She slept every other day. My dad was gone in and out of the house. And that was her first 10 years that she slept every other day taking care of these kids. So I have this role model that is literally second to none. About as tough as a woman as you're ever going to run into. And also a great perspective on life, and never complained. I never heard her complain one time. At no time ever did my mother ever talk about how tough her world was or what her life was. And so 7 years later, they got pregnant again, and I came along. And so they didn't want me to be an only child. And so I have a 22-month younger brother, and I have a 4-year younger sister. And so there's 9 of us all together. Abject poverty. Like I said, my mother was largely by herself for most of those years and just did everything that she could to hang on to the family. So there was 11 of us living in a 2.5 bedroom house and stole food to eat as a kid. I mean, in those days, there wasn't really food stamps had not really come along yet to the extent they were. You got your food from the government, meaning you went to the warehouse. I can remember going with my mother as a little guy and carrying the box, and it had cheese and it had bread and it had beef and all of those, kind of just the powdered milk. Anybody hasn't ever had powdered milk. And that was what we ate. And my mother would get 100 pounds of potatoes and she'd make it last, a week and a half. And literally we would eat almost the same thing every other day. So when you have so many, I have 4 brothers, 3 brothers, 4 total, and 5 sisters. And so I had 2 older brothers that were the oldest and the 3rd oldest. And so they're eating everything in the house, and my mother would squirrel away food for us little kids. And ultimately my little brother and I came up with some very good cons to steal food just to eat. We would take 2 buses across town to school, to this private Christian school that allowed us to go there for free because of, we didn't have the resources. And again, we thought nothing of it, traveling across Portland, Oregon in the mid 70s at 6 years old, jumping on 2 buses and transferring through town, 6:30 in the morning and 6:30 at night.
Yeah. You learned survival very young.
Yeah, very, very much so. And as part of that, then I got a job as an 11-year-old. I paid taxes in 1980 as an 11-year-old, if you can imagine that.
When you told me that you've been working and paying taxes since you were 11 years old, I've never, ever heard that before.
Yeah, every year since then, $2.35 I made, and I've never not had a job since then. And like I said, I have worked and paid taxes every year since then. And the neat thing about the job, it was a local restaurant that hired me to wash dishes on a Saturday. So I got there at 6 o'clock in the morning and I left at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I remember very clearly the first thing I ever ate at a restaurant was the meal that they gave me, which was a club sandwich. And I thought, I'm
Mm.
going to get the club sandwich because it was the biggest looking thing on the menu.
Yeah.
And then they took the fries and put it in between the 4 pieces. And for someone like me, that was unimaginable. I would have worked all day. Forget about the check they gave me. I would have worked all day for the sandwich alone. And so I remember that like it was absolutely yesterday. In fact, my son is now 24 years old, but I mean, most of his life he ordered club sandwiches whenever we go to a restaurant because he just thought that was the neatest story ever about his old man and what happened to him when he was young. And then they would pay me a check, $17.35 after taxes, and I would take it around the corner to the local grocery store, and they would cash it, and I would get all ones, so that I had this big wad, and it looked like, because I saw the rich guys on TV, you're always flipping your money. And so that was me carrying around 17 $1 bills and thinking I was something circa 1980.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
So get into your teenage years and kind of the, trajectory of your life and how you kind of, everything that happened.
So when you grow up like that in kind of the neighborhood that I grew up, everyone is poor, and it's made up of blacks and whites and Hispanics and everything in between. And the thing we all have in common is we're all poor. And so some are a little bit less poor than others. And I think it's important for today's crowd to understand what poor meant in the context of 1980, 1976, 1983 versus today. The things that the poor people have today in the world, in the United States, are things that rich people had when I was a kid. And so when you're talking about air conditioning, a television, a telephone, a car, right? These are all things that were unimaginable to almost everyone that I knew growing up. And so it's important to understand when we're talking about stealing food, that's because there was never enough food.
And you said there wasn't even food stamps.
No, and the food stamp program had not reached us yet. We used to go and get the money from the government. It was kind of like, it looked like, like army issue. It was always in white boxes, and it said cheese on the side or beef on the side, or it was carnation milk, and it come in a 5-gallon deal. Powdered milk. So that was just kind of what we knew. And so in that context, when you're growing up, things are very violent. And I was right in the middle of it. Again, I'm 6'4", 240 pounds as I sit here right now. So I was always a big kid. And as the oldest of the second family, always happy to engage in fighting. And this starts at 5, 6 years old. We're taking the bus across town. You get to know everybody. But the things that you also learn about in Portland in that time, heroin was a big deal. And so I'm a 7-year-old, and you would have to go downstairs. I have my little brother who's 6 years old, and use the bathroom in the downtown, the public bathroom. Well, it's a heroin den. It's underneath the city. They're all closed up now. And they had, I remember very clearly, they had 2 toilets that sat on little ridges, no doors or walls or anything, and a couple of urinals. And my brother, nature hits, you got to go. We knew, we were smart enough, we didn't want to go down there. And my brother would have to go, and I'd stand there. I'm 7 years old, trying to protect him, because the heroin addicts are trying to get at you, little kids sitting there with your pants pulled down. And so that was, to us, it wasn't like the trauma that that stuck with me. It was more like, here's this funny story. When I was a kid, I used to have to protect my brother from getting molested while we were trying to go to the bathroom, because you just hope that when you go through town, it doesn't hit, because there's nowhere to go. And you would go downstairs in this terrible, subterranean bathroom that served as a den for, all kinds of things that went on that you don't want to be a part of when you're 7 years old. And so you get to know the bums, and you get to know the hookers, and you get to know the addicts. And I mean, that's just your life, and you don't know any different. And you understand that you have to watch your back, and you have to be careful. And so I picked up these lessons. I learned many of them the hard way, and then hopefully trying to make my life a little bit easier. As life goes on and you get bigger, it becomes much more violent. In particular for men, I probably have been in 150 fights in my life, just fist fights over the smallest thing, so there's rules on the street that dictate you throw the first punch, you never get the first punch thrown at you. So if you think anything's going to happen, it just turned into violence. And this is not like today where everything turns into a gunfight, right? There wasn't guns necessarily in those days like there is today. It was good old knuckles and, whatever you could grab. And so that just kind of became a way of life. So black eyes and you know, dislocated
Survival.
fingers kind of just became a way of life. Yeah. So when I was 14, I got robbed at 14. I tell this story. The story that really changed my life was I got robbed. I took $80. I had $80 in the bank, I should say. I took $75 out of the bank. I left $5 in there. I had a card. I never forget, a debit card, and had my name on it. And I thought, man, I arrived, right? I'm 14 years old. This is 1983. I arrived. I have something with my name on it. I take all of my savings, all the money I have in the bank, $75 out. Southeast Portland. I don't notice there's a couple of 4 guys behind me. I should have, and they got me at the bus stop, and they put it to me pretty good. And they damn near killed me. They broke 2 ribs. They broke my nose. They left me for dead. They rolled me underneath the bus stop and ran off with everything that I had aside from my life. So I kept the most important thing. And I woke up a couple hours later and trying to figure out where I am. I got blood down my front. Both eyes are black. My nose is broken. 2 ribs are broken. I get on the bus. I transfer. I pass out under a tree at a transfer point. Again, there's nobody to call, though. See, the early lessons that I learned as a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old benefited me greatly when the violence ramped up and the things that started to happen to me ramped up. So that rather than look for help, there is no help. And so that you have to help yourself. And that brings me to this story. As I'm walking home, I wake back up, I get on the bus, I go to the part where I have to get off, and now I have a 2-mile walk home. And I could take you to this spot in Portland. I go here, I go back to Portland, I have business there. I'm there 1 week a month. And about every 3rd month, I go down to this spot because this spot means so much to me. It's right before you go over the interstate freeway on 60th Avenue, just south of Gleason Street. You know, doesn't mean anything to anybody, but there is an oversized square in the sidewalk. And right next to it is some duplexes. And I stepped on that square. I'm on this walk home, about to go over the freeway. And a voice said to me outside of my head, so much so I thought it was in the duplex window as I'm walking down the sidewalk. And it said, "Everything is your fault." Now, I'm delirious, right? I'm half dead. I'm beaten. I don't know what's going on with my body.
Yeah.
This is now, I'm 4 or 5 hours into taking this beating. But it said clear as day, and it stopped me in my tracks. And it said to my right, from that, what I thought was coming out of that duplex, "Everything is your fault. Whatever happens, it's up to you. There's no one at home. No one's going to help you. It's up to you." And I turned, this is on my children's eyes. I talked back to it and I said, "Well, that's crazy. Nothing's my fault." And it said, "If you don't change, you're going to be like everybody else." Very simple. Again, Jiminy Cricket, the haze I was in from the beating, God was delivering me a message. My conscience was telling me something. It talked to me, though, in a way that no one had ever talked to me before. These are words that I had never heard before, spoken to me that way. And it did not take right away. I'm 14 years old. I should say 1 year before that, my next oldest sister, so the 6th child, died on her 21st birthday. She was my mother, essentially, because she was 7 years older than me, and she's the one that was responsible for us. And she got sick and died in about 7 months, and she died on her 21st birthday. 4 months after that, I went blind in my right eye and almost lost all the vision in my left eye. I got a virus. It ate my right retina. They were able to go in and save my actual eye, but I've been blind in it since I was 14 then. And then assisted, so I can see out of my left eye with a contact now, obviously, but my vision went to 2250. Really terrible vision from perfectly good vision, a virus. And so that's kind of the last year of my life again, but I'm a survivor. So in that context, all these things are happening. The voice says to me, "Everything's your fault." I go home. Subsequently, I have a little nub on my nose because I held it shut for 3 days, because that's what you called going to the hospital when I was a kid. And pretty soon it stopped opening. So when it stopped opening, I thought, okay, I can let go of it. And the ribs heal. And to this day, they still give me some trouble. But, I was in those situations more than a few times, but that one in particular kind of stayed with me, and it gave me that epiphany. That voice told me everything is your fault. That set the foundation for what would then be really the rest of my life as I begin to climb my way out of the situation I was living in. The other significant story that I would tell from that same time frame is I was 19 and I was playing pool, and I got caught in an alleyway by some guys that I had taken some money off playing pool and gotten into some trouble with a couple of weeks before, and they caught me in the back. Sandy Lanes, Portland, Oregon, off of 58th and Sandy. Place burnt down about 15 years ago. And I came, and one came around the front and one came around the back, and they got me. And again, stupid me. But this is interesting. As I'm coming out in this little alleyway, one comes in front of me and he's stopping me and he engages me, and I hear the door close behind me. And so because I'm blind in my right eye, this eye, I turn to my left. Well, as I turn to my left, the guy behind me is trying to shove a 10-inch screwdriver into my liver. So up on my right side is trying to put it in my liver. But as I turned this way, it missed and it went into the meat here on my right-hand side, and it came out just a little bit on my left-hand side here, or on my, right here on my right-hand side, and it stuck. The muscle grabbed it. Now, I didn't know I was stabbed at the time, and I deal with him, and so I got out of that. Again, I'm a big, tough, rough kid. I know the streets, and I got out of that, and I get in this just complete POS car that I had, this little tiny 600 square foot apartment I was living in. But when I got in the car, I got to work a clutch. I couldn't sit back right. And I was like, wait, something's not right. The adrenaline's running and all that. And I'm like, feel back there. The reason why is a 10-inch screwdriver. And in those days, when you're a street kid, you're carrying a screwdriver that you sharpen down because the police will leave you alone, right? It's just a tool. So that's what we would do. And that's what he did. Big, long, skinny one. So I have that hanging out of my back facing that direction. This is Friday night. I go home to my apartment. I lay I'm 19 years old. I lay in the water. It should have been cold, but I had it warm, and it took me about 6 hours. I remember it like it was yesterday, because I would have to reach out behind me and I could barely get a hold of it, and it's kind of facing that direction, and I could move it a few inches. I wasn't bleeding profusely. I'm smart enough to know I don't need to go to the hospital. If I showed up at the hospital with a screwdriver in my back, it's going to cause me trouble. You never want trouble. I saw a murder, a gang hit about 10 feet in front of me at the high school that I went to, in between classes. A gang, like I said, a gang of Bloods hit the Asian gang was selling in his territory. We saw it coming. Everybody backs up. It's two people. One walks in front of him to turn the victim, and then the guy coming in behind him, and about 10 feet in front of me, double clicks him in the back of his head with a 22. I'll never forget, too, as he crumpled down, because you just fall. It's not like in the movies, it's not all dramatic.
Yeah.
Just like the life just left his body, and he just goes and he slumps down, and he kind of slumped forward like he was sleeping. And the blood, I can remember it spraying, and a little bit less every time out of only one hole, even though they hit him twice. And so I had, again, that's just interestingly enough, they put yellow tape around it, brought the cops in. I left because I know if ever there's a murder, you gotta go. And we all went back to school, though. The school, school wasn't out for the day. You just the quad, and you put the yellow tape around it. So it's important that we say that, because again, you start to become used to these things. They don't control you. You don't go home fretting about how you saw that guy. I saw another guy. I was in a pool room at 17 years old, 2:30 in the morning. Don't ask me why I'm in a pool room. It's 2:30 in the morning at 17 years old. And I saw a guy hit a guy with a pool ball clean in the middle of his forehead, threw it at him. And the guy went back and hit his head and was dead on the spot. And again, you got to get up and you got to go, because that's gangs, right? And you don't know anything when you live in those neighborhoods. And I was going home at the time. My home was a $25 a week flop house with hookers and heroin addicts that I would rent. We'd all share the same bathroom on the same floor, that kind of, but it was affordable. And I had a full-time job at the time. And so that's just what I did. But I didn't, know any better. So I'm in the bathtub pulling this screwdriver out, and I finally get it out, and I wrap my only towel around it and go to work on Monday morning. Macadam Carpet Warehouse. I was pulling carpet out of rafters and cutting it for people to go and install. And I was there Monday morning. I mean, that, again, so you just, with that kind of baseline, with that kind of foundation built, you go one of two ways. And the majority of the people who come where I come from go one direction. But I had a secret weapon, and my secret weapon was that I was number 7 child. So I was gifted with the ability to observe and to watch and kind of question and to look at something and go, and I don't know about that. And that might be my brother's going to prison. That, not that I was able to avoid jail and all those things, but only as a child, not as an adult, right? That might be, that doesn't, my sisters get pregnant. I don't think that's for me, right? My life's hard enough already. My mother's fantastic, but I never see her, all of those things. And so I see him doing drugs. I see him going to prison for doing drugs. It doesn't look like that's for me, right? I see. So I'd like to say it just, took just like that at 14, 15, 16 years old. It did not. By the time I started getting into my 20s, I started thinking about the world differently. And I said, if that's how you act on alcohol and drugs, I'm not going to do that. And I simply did not. If that's what happens when you smoke cigarettes look to me like they lead to alcohol, and alcohol looks to me like that leads to drugs. And I'm just not going to do those things. So I've never smoked, I've never drank, and I've never done drugs. And coming where I come from, that's saying something. So I just had to figure out a different way to cope. And for me, that was sports primarily. And so sports and work were the two things that just kept me going for all of those years. So in a nutshell, there's a bunch of other violence and things that we could talk about. I think that kind of gives a broad picture to how I was raised through my teenage years.
At a very young age. I mean, you were exposed to this, but I love the story about how you said you've been working since you're 11, how you've had several companies, you've been very successful. Tell the story about your job where they put you in charge of, was it in charge of your boss's job? Was that what it was? This story is awesome.
This story is an example of when you're trying from a success perspective, when you are trying to find success and better yourself, sometimes you got to risk it and sometimes you got to sacrifice. And so in this case, I took a job as a driver. I was about 20 years old and I thought, this sounds like a cool job. I like to drive. No one's looking over my shoulder. I'm getting a commission. I can move around town. I like the job. But this dispatcher sucked that they had. And she was doing the job and I was there for about 6 months. And I went to the owner and I said, man, your dispatcher's really bad at this job. I said, I'll tell you what, let me do the job. And I made some assumptions. And I said to her, and I don't know, Tracy, I have no idea where this confidence comes from, the ability to use these words to make these assumptions. I don't know where that came from. I really don't. But again, as a street kid, I've always said I'll take common sense over education almost every single time because it'll get you a long, long way. Some street smarts are extremely valuable tools to have. And so I just read the situation and I said, look, I'll do that job for you. And it was a terrible job, 10 hours a day, no 500 orders. You get little labels that look like this and you're taking them apart. You're writing and you got a foot pedal and you're calling out orders. And I mean, it's just constant. It never stops. I was really, really good at it. And I said, and I didn't know that at the time, but I said, I'll do their job for $10 an hour. I'll do this filthy job for $10 an hour. It's 10 hours a day. If at the end of 6 months, you think I've done a nice job, you give me her salary. I figured she was making about 40 grand. Now I can tell you, that 40 grand to me at 21 years old was more money than I could. It might have been $1 million. It was unimaginable amount of money. And I'm just sitting there like, oh yeah, no problem. You just pay me what you're paying her. Turns out I was really good at that. And I took that company from $1 million to $5 million. And at the end of 6 months, of course, I got the job. I got a $45,000 a year salary. And it was kind of the basis of, oh, I see. I have inherent value that I can maximize. I had always learned, starting at 11 years old, I left that job washing dishes because at 12 years old, International House of Pancakes paid me 50 cents more to come wash dishes. And I got to work on Saturday and Sunday at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I take the bus downtown at 6 o'clock in the morning as a 12-year-old and wash dishes Saturday and Sunday all day at International House of Pancakes. So I figured out also, again, as a street kid, I get the hustle, I get the con. I figured out they'll pay me more money. I'll go there and do that. Give 2-week notice. And then I'm going to go do that. Give 2-week notice. I went from there and I went to work at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. And then from there to Safeway. And I had about 10 or 12 jobs during that period that just paid me more. And ultimately this driving job paid me more. So I took that. Now I've taken the job as a dispatcher. And ultimately then at 28 years old, I was approached by an outside group. So I ran this company from 22 to 28. We took it from 1 million to 5 million. And I was approached by an outside group to say, hey, you've done a nice job. You've trained a bunch of people. We've designed some very, very early software in those days. And they said, we want to finance you and start your own company. And that was the second big epiphany of my life because they sent me some financials, a P&L, a forward-looking prospectus that kind of said this is what the business should do. And I looked at it sitting in my office, and here I was running this big operation, and people twice as old as me are working for me, and I know everything, and you can't touch me, and I'm a street kid, and I'm tough, and I'm all these things. And I didn't know what I was looking at.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. I'd never dealt with this side of the business. I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know anything about payroll. I didn't know anything about
Yeah.
any of those things. I just knew operations. And the second big epiphany, another voice, this one in my head, though, not quite as dramatic as the one where I took the beating, but it just said to me, shut up and listen. If you don't shut up and listen, you're going to be doing the same thing you're doing right now when you're 50. That's what it said.
Yeah.
And by this point, I'd used to listening to that voice. And I said, I can see that. I can see that. So that was a radical change for me. And this is one of the things that when you come from a background that I come from, it is very difficult to shut up and listen. Poor people, poor white trash, I call myself, right? Where I come from, we know everything. We have every answer. Life is just difficult. It is. And there is something innate in us that tells us that we have to be right about everything. And we want to argue about all of it, regardless of whether or not you're right or wrong. And men are way worse at this, I think, than women are. So that's where I come from, is you're just right about everything. But I just saw you break that thing. No, I didn't. And here's all the reasons why I didn't do it, right? And you'll just do it with a straight face. So I had witnessed that, and I had seen that. I think that's where that came from. And it just told me to shut up and listen. And I took it to heart. I mean, I took it to heart. I got rid of all my friends. I quit hanging out at the bar, watching sports, playing sports, talking about sports while we're watching and playing sports. I mean, that was my life aside from work. I got rid of all of that, and I went and found people that were smarter than me. I went and found, and that was difficult. And then when I found them, I shut up and listened, and I learned. And I started reading things that I only started reading true stories, true biographies. I didn't want to read any fiction or any of those things. And I just kind of immersed myself into this whole other world that I had no idea even existed, because I lived inside of this little operational bubble that I was really good at. But the world was this much bigger. And so when they put that in front of me, I had that epiphany, and kind of the basis of that business ended up going upside down after the first year. I did my job, $3 million in revenue. They didn't have the money they said they did. They came in and fired me. I turned around 17 days later, went to my 6 biggest customers that I had just moved to the new company, went to all of them, said, I got to start a new one, and I want you to move with me. And they're like, good God, Jerry, we just did. I said, I'm not done talking, and I want you to prepay me. Because the answer to any question never asked is always no. And I didn't know any better, because again, I don't read the books. I'm not educated. I got a 15-year-old education. All I know is I need the money to start the business. I understand what cash flow is now. I understand how math works. I need you guys to prepay me. They prepaid me for 10 years. I went 6 for 6. Nobody said no, because I did such a good job for them. So from living with hookers and heroin addicts at 17 years old to a millionaire at 33 years old.
You had the School of Hard Knocks, is where you got your education.
And I'm not a victim.
Yeah.
I'm not a victim.
And I have a note to talk about this. You speak so highly of your mom and what she did for you guys, and how I can't even imagine, to be honest. How did you stay out of that victim mode? Did you have a time in your life where you felt sorry for yourself? You had to have had some moments where, why is this my life?
There are a few. I am not a clique guy. I've never been a group guy, right? So again, I had the benefit of watching my older brothers and sisters. Now I have a little brother that did not follow this path, and he's struggled and has struggled to this day. And so much like my older brothers. And so I just watched, but I learned at 11 years old that if I worked, I ate. And so work and eating became synonymous. And so all the way, my kids, I have 3 children, they missed 3 days of work, or 3 days of school from 3 years old to graduating high school. Between the 3 of them, they missed 3 days. My one son didn't miss a single day, because I always said to them, how sick are you? Are you too sick that you're not going to eat today, right? That if you don't go to work or if you don't go to school, you're not going to be able to eat. And that mentality kind of really put into me at 11 years old, started at 11 years old, was the basis for a lot of the behavior I had. I couldn't go out and eat or drink, also because I had to work, but I know where drinking goes to. I drank a little as in my teens, but I was a violent human being. My rage was massively just had to be controlled, and alcohol, and the couple of times that I did that, brought it out of me. And I knew that in 2 different occasions, again, I always talk about this is my inside voice, but my life has been guided, particularly as a young man, with this conscience. I went to this Christian church school that I alluded to earlier. Again, it was very cultish. So that's a whole nother, they would stand me in front of the wall for an hour after school with my nose touching because I got too many demerits for talking, and we'd get spanked every, twice a week, good on average, with this big paddle if you acted out. And it was just for a couple of street kids like my brother and I. It was a very difficult situation, but I loved every minute of it. I loved all the memories of it, even though, look, it was the 70s. Things got a little wacky.
Yeah.
But I look back at that, and I had this baseline conscience that they taught me, and all the Bible verses and all of the songs and generally how I was treated overall, aside from the couple of things I just talked about there. It just stuck with me, and I liked the morality of it. And so I had a sense of right and wrong. And 2 different times I have been in street fights on the bus lines in downtown Portland, standing over someone. No one ever really wins a fight, so you're still bleeding and all beat up, but it's over. And my boot is in the air, and I'm going to bring it down on his head, and it's over. And that little voice, twice, 2 different times, the voice in my head said to me, "That's enough. Go any further, and it's going to be much worse for you."
So when you have that little voice, and whatever it is that's talking to you, like, this is your fault, did that piss you off to hear that? Or was it so powerful that you're like, oh, I guess it is. I got to start paying attention to this.
I am not an emotional person. And so even as a young man, like I talked about the rage, I largely kept it under control. And as you're standing there about to put your boot down and the voice tells you don't do that, you've gone far enough. I'm listening to it. And so I put my foot down and go, no, I don't want to go to prison. I just need to walk away from this. And then I'm not going to go to prison for murder. And so the calmness that I don't get high and I don't get low. I kept everything under control. In business, as I've gone on, my companies have done hundreds of millions of dollars. I've owned a dozen businesses. There's no money in emotion, right? So if you've done something and this is your baby and you built it, but it's losing money, you got to ditch it. And so that mindset that I got growing up contributed to my ability to operate and perform business, because the rules are somewhat the same. And so I think the answer to your question is that it wasn't a hockey stick. I didn't just take off, right? Oh, I had this epiphany and this voice told me whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't that at all. But then I was like, boy, that was weird, but I got to kind of think about that. And then as the years roll by, but the coagulation point where everything kind of came together was my son being born at 28 years old. He was born at 28 in my life. My first son. I have 2 sons. I have a daughter in the middle, and it's absolutely changed my life. And so when my son was born, I looked at the world I came from, and so many people that come from where I come from. And again, by this time I'm 28. That means I know people who have 12-year-olds. I know people who have 13, 14-year-olds, right? And I'm 28 years old, that I grew up with. And so I was like, no, it's not my program. These kids are going to have grandparents. I hadn't seen my parents other than a few holidays for 10 years. And so back around I come and set down the rules and start putting a life together, because I wanted something more for my son. I can't overemphasize, as someone who comes from kind of the stories that I've just provided to you, having a child and what having my son did to my life. The second he was born, my life was different. And I wanted to do things for the first time in my life, for somebody other than me. Not that I was necessarily selfish and I had friends, but all of a sudden I had purpose. And that purpose was this little dude. And this little dude was not going to come from where I came from. He was not going to go through what I went through. That was not going to happen. And so I started to kind of evaluate, what skills do I have? And I'll tell you, one skill I have is I have the ability to survive. And whatever the world throws at me, no matter how difficult it is, at 38, I had a block pop up in the middle of nowhere. Apparently I was born with it, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Yeah, I was going to bring up, you've had 17 surgeries.
Just on my back, right? I've had 3 surgeries on my heart. Yeah, I mean, so I was equipped for that. But at 28, I was just ready to have my son. The epiphany was, had come, and I was starting this new business. I had a half-built house, but I just felt powerful. And that came from my son. And then my daughter came 2 years later, and then my son came 2 years later. And I should stop and say, today, I was late I'm sorry again, Tracy, late for the podcast.
Oh,
I
no, you had a good reason.
I was putting my youngest son is shipping out, and I got to spend the last 3.5 months. He worked at Nissan. He's a great kid. He bought a duplex a couple of years ago with his sister. They live over in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and he worked a graveyard shift at Nissan. And he's been wanting to go in the military, and political reasons and other reasons he didn't. And he's like, Dad, I'm 23. What do you think? Should I try one more time? It's like, of course, you've always wanted to. And so he's off to be an MP. And I got to spend the last 3.5 months, 4 days a week after his graveyard shift. I would meet him at the gym, training him. I'm a big gym guy. I'm a big health guy, and training him and working with him and doing miles and all the rest of these things for the last 3.5 months. And that whole culmination of that, we worked out yesterday as he's getting on the bus today to head up to Missouri to go to basic training to become a military police at 24 years old. And there is nothing in my life that comes anywhere near to how I feel about what I just did today and putting him on that bus, and what the last 3.5 months were, and really what the entirety of him and his brother and sister's life meant. Children brought me a humanity that you don't find where I come from. Right. And that's part of the disconnect. That's why so many of us struggle coming where I come from, because it's hard. Because when life is so harsh on you, when it beats you up so much, it's just so easy to point to everything else and not take responsibility for it. And I just didn't do that, so much so that now I can look at it and go, I would live through everything times 10 to go through again what I got to go through with my children.
They where you're at now.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, I'd go back.
Army? Did he?
Correct. He enlisted in the Army. He's going to be a military police.
Is he going to Fort Leonard?
He's going, Fort Leonard Wood. Yes, ma'am.
No, yep. I've been there.
I put him on a bus to there this morning. Well, military put him on a bus to there this morning.
Congratulations. That's incredible. Their ex-boyfriend of mine went to his basic training there, and I went to his graduation many years ago.
I will be up there in December going to his graduation. And so it's
wonderful.
And so in that context, when I have kids, the children are my kids. I just they weren't going to have the life that I have. They weren't. And this is, again, I come from this neighborhood, so I know what I'm talking about. But so often people in my position tell themselves that if it's good for them, it's good for their kids. Right. I want to
ask you when you're talking about this, because there's so many people out there that are in the position you were in, that are growing up in a, very similar situation. They don't have anybody to turn to. They have no money. They don't know how they're going to eat. And they're young, they're children. What would you say? Like, do you say to somebody who's struggling, like, how do you want to leave your legacy? I mean, how do you give them hope to keep going?
I think that is a steep hill to climb, because life is so easy today. So the first step, I have this picture on my phone that I
can't believe you're saying that, because there's so many people that think life sucks and it's so hard. So I'm glad you're talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a superpower, to answer your question specifically, is perspective. And so what I teach in business and in life is perspective. One of my superpowers is perspective. So when I am looking to risk everything on a new venture, I don't think twice about it necessarily. I'm going to do my homework, but I know what poor looks like. You're never going to get me back there. I've already been there. I know how to get out of that, because I've lived through it and I've survived it and I've climbed out of it. So I know how to survive these things. And if I can't survive this one, I'll survive the next one and I'll rebuild it. None of those things scare me, but I never lose perspective. I always know that no matter how hard I have it or had it, somebody else has had it harder. And I don't forget that. So who am I to complain? Well, I'm telling you, that perspective is an absolute superpower. And so anybody today that does that thinks they're poor needs to have perspective. Go look and see somebody that is poor circa 1975 living in Portland, Oregon. And I can promise you that poor is stealing food. No one today knows anyone that steals food. They probably know people who steal, but nobody knows anybody that steals food. In those days, worldwide, poverty was 90%. And now it's 10% worldwide, right? I mean, it's just a way different world today. I didn't have a telephone. I didn't have a television. I didn't have a car, right? Yeah. We had nothing. There was nothing. And so there's no support. There's no benefits. There's nothing. And so, and everyone else around you has nothing. And so understanding that everyone today has something. right? Never. I love how poor people use their $1,000 phone to complain about all the issues in society.
I know.
Right?
Well, growing up, I remember grew up in the 70s too, but I remember my grandmother, they were immigrants from Italy, and she grew up during the Great Depression. And
Yeah.
so I remember growing up, she used to say, "You don't know what suffering is." I remember they used to have the government cheese, and and she's like, "You don't know what suffering is." And I think about it, and that's such a great point that you said. They've got their $1,000 phones and they think that they've got it tough. How do you, it's got to be so hard it's got to be frustrating to try and reason with people that, just don't get it.
Yes, it's almost impossible because the victim mentality is very powerful. Again, it was powerful when I was a kid, and it's powerful today. And it's hard to escape because it's so easy to blame everybody else for your problems. That epiphany at 14 years old manifested itself at 28 years old when I started my company and my son was born. The second company then I went and did, again, it was everything is my fault. I have had mistakes that cost me 7 figures. So I've made multiple 7-figure mistakes. That's $1 million gone. And I've made multiples of those. I have had people on my behalf lose 6 figures on accident on my behalf. And every single time I don't get excited. I don't get pissed off because that gives you no value. I go, what did I do? What mistake did I make that I empowered somebody that put them in a position to lose me $100,000 or $500,000? And why would I get upset about that anyway when I've made mistakes on my own that cost me 7 figures?
Yeah.
So I'm just being reasonable with myself, and I'm not looking for an excuse, and I am not a victim. So if something, I don't know anybody that has more excuses than I do. Again, we'll talk about my health. 38 years. I broke my back at 19 years old. Yeah. I was on a forklift I was in a dumpster strapped on a forklift on the 2nd level. The strap pops, down I go. I fall on my back. This dumpster comes down, hits me right in the waist, breaks my back. A year and a half.
You said you've been hospitalized 61 times?
Since 2017, when I was 38, I had apparently I was born with it, and I have a 40% block in my left ventricle that caused AFib and A-flutter. My heart would go 245 beats a minute for days at a time. I was addicted to opioids for 25 years, and I'm talking 200, 300 milligrams of some of the most powerful opioids that you can eat. And so, and in November of 21, I almost died, down 4 pints of blood. I weighed 310 pounds. I was laying in the hospital that I walked into under my own power because I didn't feel good. And they immediately admitted me. And I decided right then, January 1st of 2022, I was going to change my life. I lost 100 pounds. My back pain went away. I went off of the opioids. I eat all carnivore diet, so I only eat meat and protein. I put on 30 pounds of muscle. I've done 6 half marathons, and I hate running. I lift weights 6 days a week, right? I walk.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
All in the last 3.5 years. I've never been stronger. I've never felt better at 56 years old. Everything went away. Everything that ailed me went away. I got to spend the last 3.5 months training my son to get ready for the military. Nothing but value has come out of that, because as I was laying in that hospital bed saying, woe is me, I found myself back to when my son was born at 28 years old. And now I'm looking at grandchildren. And I'll be damned if I'm going to, I had no grandkids or no grandparents. I never met them. I had no aunts and uncles. I met them only later in life. I had no cousins. I had none of those things. My kids have had a ton of those plus. And so I said, I'm not having my grandkids grow up without their grandfather. Not if I have anything to do about it. And so it really took me back to that time when my son was born at 28. And I said, I just got to do it again at 52. And so I'm 51. I was about to turn 52 in January. So January 1st, after laying in that hospital bed, I said, no more. I lost 100 pounds in 8.5 months. And I've not looked back. Oh, yeah, I went crazy. And I've not looked back. And again, because I took responsibility for it. Woe is me, my heart's bad. Woe is me, I broke my back. And broke my back.
So you did allow yourself to have a little moment of Pity, but
Yes,
it doesn't sound like it lasted long.
I think, but while I'm doing, let's put it in perspective though. I broke my back. I didn't get it operated on for a year and a half. I put the dumpster back on the forklift before I got caught because I needed the job. I was working at a car wash warehouse at the time. And I put everything back before anyone caught me. And I limped around for a year and a half before I finally got what is turned out to be the first of 17 procedures on my back. So while I'm doing that though, and I'm limping through that, I've never missed a day of work. And so I built all of these companies while I'm addicted to all of these opioids that no one would have any idea that I was addicted to them. So I did have some of the woe is me, particularly after at 38 when the AFib and A-flutter hit and all those issues happened, and I was taking 19 pills a day, but I'm still running I never made more money than I did between 38 and 48 while I'm dealing with all of this.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know, the Incredible Hulk. I don't know.
It's just no excuses, right? So I guess to your point, I never, even if I said woe was me, I wouldn't tell anybody. I wouldn't verbalize that. It just is life, because life is so much harder than the life I had. I'm driving a $160,000 Mercedes-Benz and my back is bad. What am I going to complain about?
Well, and it's funny because I want everybody to listen to this and really, really listen to what you're saying, because this is how you break that generational trauma.
Institutional, generational poverty.
You are the perfect example of how you break that, and you didn't hand that down to your own kids, like just the opposite.
Right.
Actually, you basically did the opposite.
Right. And that's because the sacrifice for my kids, whatever it took, it didn't matter, because they were going to have a life better than the one that I had. So I mean, I'll say sacrifice for the purposes of this conversation, but I'd go back and do it times 12 if I had to, and think nothing about it. And let's define success too, as people who come from a poor traumatic background. Success was just my kids graduating from high school. I mean, most of the people I knew didn't graduate from high school that I grew up with, right? I mean, we all,
yourself included.
Yeah, you dropped out at 15. That's just what you did. Yeah. And so that they graduated from high school, I could die a happy man because they graduated from high school. But when that early on, when that was my target, all of a sudden you learn, oh no, there's so much more to life. These kids can do so much more. It can be so much better. I sent them to Chinese immersion school starting at 3 years old. They read, write, and speak Chinese fluently. I sent them to Chinese, 3 years old until the 5th grade. And then at 6th grade to 8th grade, I sent them to Catholic school because I wanted to be exposed to that. And then they went to a Christian high school because I wanted them to be exposed to that. And so all of these things are unimaginable to me as a child, but I wanted more for them. And so if you ask me how I got out and what I did, my son being born was critical. My children being born was a big part of that, because I really started living for them as opposed to me. And I, like my mother, put myself on the back burner. She's 87 years old. I just saw her last month. I said, Mom, if you could go back and do it again, as my kids are getting older and leaving the house and going and doing their things, I said, if you could go back and do it again, would you? She starts crying. I think about it every day, she says. I said, but you suffered so much. She said, oh, it was the greatest thing ever. I could do so much better the next time. And she slept every other day for a decade. Can you imagine the pressure on this woman? She took a bus to have her 3rd child in labor. She took a bus, a city bus, right? Tough as you're going to come. And so that's what I grew up with. That's what I saw. That's what I learned. And it wasn't necessary. I mean, this woman could give a beating like nobody's business, right? And I deserved every single one of them. She apologizes now, and I tell them, look, you got me one time for every 10. I deserved it. But my mother taught me arbitrage. I had to learn, was the thing that I was going to do worth the beating that I might take? And so she kept me from doing things that I otherwise would have, because I just like, no, I don't want to do that one thing. The risk is too high. I might get caught. And the beating that my mother's going to put on me is just not worth what I'm going to get out of that. So she had me thinking like a businessman very early on relative to the beating she was going to put on me. You're thinking of that
paddle.
Yes, right. So that was my example. And so I just followed that example. The problem is, not too many, my brothers and sisters didn't, and not too many people do follow those examples, because it's everybody in that circumstance. When you have trauma, when you grow up traumatic, I haven't even got in, there's all sorts of stories I won't even tell you.
Oh, you said your wife has a bunch too. Yeah,
it's just the way life is, right? And when you grow up in that kind of, we'll just call it white trash. That's what I call, that's where I came from. That's who I am. It's so hard to escape, because everyone around you is the same way, and everyone is telling you it's not your fault, and everyone doesn't want you to escape, because if they escape, if you escape and you do what you do, now they have to judge you, because it can't be that you got out because of your own free will, because of course there is no free will, because we are poor and we are traumatized because of the things that happen to us. Therefore, we can't go on and do things that other people do. We're limited because we come from this background, and nothing was truer. And I really rebelled against that. I didn't necessarily rebel against the establishment or go do drugs and alcohol and all this. I rebelled against the environment that I grew up in. And I said, I'm not going to do that. My best friend since I was 16 years old, I met him at McDonald's, same thing. Worst life than I had. Doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, works with me to this day. 2 of my kids are named after him, right? So I did meet somebody that was like-minded, and we kind of gelled over sports, and we worked at McDonald's together, and he didn't smoke or drink. And again, best friends to this day. So I kind of had that support working for me also. But I was determined to escape where I came from. Just to me, that meant $40,000 a year job. I had no concept it would turn into what it became.
Well, and that was so much money to you at that age too. And that's a lot of money for anybody starting out, even right now, you know,
Sure.
It really is. And all those years ago, what was the word you used for that for your superpower?
Perspective.
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 That I want people to really listen to that are, you know, in kind of a situation and understand, like, this is how you can end up, like, this is how you get out of it. Look at what you've had to do, you know, and you never look back, and you never, you know, you're like, I know what I have to do. And you just did it. You didn't even, it doesn't even sound like you questioned it. You're like, I'm just doing it. I'm going for it. And
that my life is whatever it is today. And so what happened yesterday, you have to have a short memory, right? You learn from your mistakes. That's critical. So self-assessment as part of that perspective is a superpower. Right behind it is self-assessment. And I have always been super critical. And so if I did something wrong, I always want to know, per my mantra, everything is my fault. What did I do that caused that? You heard me when I told the story about them beating me and taking my money. It was my fault. I put myself in a position at 14 years old that allowed me to get robbed. I was back behind that pool hall bowling alley when they robbed me back there when I got stabbed. That was my fault. So the power, that's empowering. It's a absolute superpower if you are trying to escape that kind of background, because you take responsibility for it. I don't know how people live, Tracy, when they give responsibility for their life to everyone else. When everything around you and every person around you and your environment and the government and where you come from, and my dad hated me and the school screwed me over and my counselor wasn't straight and my boss messed me up. I don't know how you live giving all of that responsibility to everybody else. I just take it all for myself and say, it's my fault. Whatever you did to me is my fault. I'll add that personal responsibility, again, 38 years old, and then January 1st of 2022, lost 100 pounds, started going to the gym, started being disciplined. And I found my life again, much like I had when I was younger. And it was just the same rules. But if you were to ask me, Jerry, what's a guy 50 years old that may not have learned the lessons that you do, and it's kind of this story resonates, I would tell them, go for a walk. Go for a walk. This isn't a get healthy exercise advice. This is, I want to turn my life around, and maybe I've not achieved what I want to, and I want to start somewhere. Just go for a walk. Just start putting in a mile or two. Do something hard that you don't think you can do and push yourself on it. The physical side of life, everything is downstream of your health. So when I was 100 pounds overweight and my heart was bad and I was addicted to the opioids and I'm having all of those issues, everything in my life suffered. I have some of the same problems today, work-wise, right? Life's always stressful. Things are always going on, but it's much more manageable in this body, eating the foods that I do than it was
when you were 300 pounds.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So it makes a huge difference mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, when your health is right and the food that you're eating is right. And so that was my baseline for losing all of the weight. I said, I got to lose. I was taking 19 pills a day. I said, I can't do it anymore. Everyone is giving me advice. I got to go to a baseline. I don't know how sick I am until I weigh 220 pounds. I'm a big guy, right? So at 220 pounds, I got down to 217. And guess what happened at 217? Everything went away. My back pain went away. No more opioids. My heart got 1,000 times better. I'm down to 1 pill from 19 pills a day. My businesses got better. The stress on my body got less. I felt better across the board. I felt 10, 15 years younger. That's no drugs. That's going from 19 drugs to one drug
Yeah.
simply by getting healthy and eating right. My entire life changed because I took responsibility for it and I fixed
Mhm.
it myself.
Well, Jerry, you are such an inspiration. I don't mean that in a I feel sorry for you kind of way. It's like you just did it. You beat all the odds. I think so many people are going to listen to this and be like, "Oh my gosh, like this is going to help me." I think a lot of people it's going to hit hard, but I think when they look, if you can do it, they can do it.
That's right. And that's my message. I appreciate you saying that because that's my message because I could sit here for 2 more hours and just tell you stories that would curl your toes about my
Yeah.
childhood. But the reality is that if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I'll just say this, it wasn't easy. I don't want to make it sound like it's
Yeah.
easy at
No.
56 and I have all the stories and all of those
Yeah.
and I've done all of those things, but what the work, the amount of work, the type of work, the things that I've done, the risk, the sacrifice, all of those things, it has been very, very difficult. But I was able to do it because I just put my head down, took responsibility for everything, and worked it.
And listened.
And man, shut up and listen was the most powerful thing in the world. I mean, that's the first piece of advice I give anybody starting a new business or coming to me and saying, Jerry, I'm not sure what I want to do. What should I do? And I was like, look, particularly you young guys, I wish I learned it at 20. I would have been way ahead of where I am today had I learned to shut up and listen at 20 instead of 28 years old. Because
Are you coaching?
what's that?
Are you coaching people?
So I just started, in fact, a new company. When I was 30, I got approached by a company, a guy, a CEO, to come and join a group that he had put together, a peer-to-peer group. I didn't even know what that was. And I was busy and crazy. And he gave me some of the best sales advice I'd ever heard. He said, you can't afford not to. And I said, I don't have time. He said, you can't afford the time. And he was right. It's a group that gets together. It's mostly
Yeah.
for in my terms, for this, it was business owners. And so there was 8 or 9 of us, and we would sit there one time a month for 4.5 hours, and everybody would bounce off what they're doing. And so I always thought, that was so impactful for me for 20 years, having that group, that I should start my own. So I started this new company, the Kronos Group, Kronos. And Kronos was the god of time, and entrepreneurs and business owners don't have nearly enough of that. And so literally I'm just putting my first group together that will get together one time a month, and then they get an hour with me, mostly around the business side. And then on the side, I work with young guys, as many as I can find. And that's more of I've always done that, go to prisons, go to the local jails in particular, and just kind of tell the guys some stories about where I come from and the things that have happened, try to let them see that there are things beyond, the streets, and you can get out of it.
I have a feeling that some people might want to reach out to you.
Please, absolutely do.
I will include your contact information. I hope some people take advantage that they might have an opportunity to have you help them.
And and I tell this to young guys, poor guys in particular. Guys like me love to talk to guys. We love to talk about our experiences and tapping into an elder who has been through there. If you can, these guys in this group helped me avoid pitfalls in business that could have cost me even more money.
Yeah.
Or if I fell into the pitfall, they helped me get out much faster than I otherwise would have. Older guys that have been through it have experience that can help you get through it. And I am no better. Then I am as humble as they come. I know exactly where I come from. I don't carry myself anyway. I'm poor white trash from Northeast Portland, 100%. And I never forget that.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you. Congratulations on your son. I'm so excited for him. And,
so am I.
And take care. And I definitely want to stay in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tracy.
The content on this podcast revolves around personal life experiences and is meant to serve as a learning tool. I am not a certified therapist or medical expert. This podcast doesn't offer medical, psychological, or professional advice. If you're curious about your mental or physical well-being, feel free to reach out to a licensed healthcare professional for assistance.